Somewhere on a shelf nobody dusts, in a folder nobody opens, 40 worlds are still waiting for a hero who will never come. Between 1998 and 2009, the decade, Diablo opened like a crypt door and never quite closed. An entire genre bloomed in its shadow. Isometric action role-playing games, click by click, spell by spell, chasing that same addictive rhythm. Kill something, take its loot, go deeper. Some were made in Seoul basements, some in German university towns, some by a single Russian developer brave or foolish enough to put his own name in the credits. They came from a Philippine studio writing gaming history for the first time, from a small Swedish company that let you play as a duck. None of them survive on modern storefronts. No Steam page, no GOG remaster. Their servers are dark, their publishers dissolve, their discs scattered across eBay listings nobody bids on anymore. This is a walk through 40 abandoned dungeons. The action RPG's history forgot before the genre even had a name. Let's dig them up. 6 months into 1998, before Diablo even had a real rival, Silver Lightning Software dropped Ancient Evil, a 24-level descent into the Crypt of the Ancients. A mad magician named Alaric had holed up inside and dared the world to come get him. 50,000 gold to anyone who could survive the trip. Only one person ever had a dead man named Jethro, whose ghost now narrates your death march downward. Warrior or ranger, melee or spellcaster, it barely mattered. Over 30 monster types were waiting either way. Critics called it a Diablo clone the day it launched. History barely disagreed. A 2001 sequel, Curse of the Snake Cult, came and went just as quietly. Today, Ancient Evil survives only on Abandonware sites like myAbandonware and Vadisware. A crypt inside a crypt. In South Korea, a very different kind of hell was hiding in Britra. A post-apocalyptic sci-fi world, gene-spliced monsters, and a hero named C, accompanied by a mutant partner who talks constantly except in a fight, when he simply vanishes and leaves you to bleed. Released by Future Entertainment World in June of '98, Britra actually won Korea's Excellent Game of the Month award. It also earned a much darker reputation. Among retro PC gamers, it's still cited as one of the hardest action RPGs ever made. Beautiful art, strong story, near unplayable odds. Nobody remembers the praise. Everybody remembers the difficulty spike. Swap the fantasy dungeon for an alien-infested colony and you get Cybermercs. Developed by the Korean studio Nora, it dropped players into 15 missions as a cybernetic mercenary. Flares, cloaking devices, holographic decoys, and, in a few missions, an actual combat mode. The real hook was the character theme. Spend your mission pay on surgery, not shopping, replacing your arms, hands, even your brain to raise your stats. Push your intelligence high enough and the game unlocks weapons you couldn't touch before. It's the kind of mechanic you'd expect from a much bigger budget. Original CD-ROMs still surface on eBay, the rest of it lives quietly on the Internet Archive. Also known as Lamentation Sword, Akuma, Demon Spawn, threw out Diablo's golden rule, one hero, one screen, and made you run 3 at once. A Japanese magician, a Chinese archer princess, a Korean nobleman avenging his father. Together, the Blood Trinity, hunting the one weapon that can put Satan back to sleep. No pause button. No mercy. Just 3 characters, real-time chaos, and a network multiplayer mode if you wanted to share the madness with friends. Triggersoft built something genuinely stranger than most of its contemporaries, and it disappeared just as fast. You'll only find it now archived, quietly, on the Internet Archive. Vadis actually made it to the ECTS trade show in 1998, a real spotlight moment for a Korean isometric action RPG. Then it went home to almost no marketing and vanished. Developed by FEW and published by Hycom Entertainment, it borrowed its speed from Diablo and its dash and block combat from Nox, X to attack, Z to block, C to dash clear. Weapons carried real elemental trade-offs. The Blue Gladius, for instance, traded raw power for pure magic damage. It supported LAN multiplayer. It had ambition. What it didn't have was distribution. And that's the difference between a classic and a footnote. Hazard looked like Diablo but played like a real-time strategy game. You didn't control one hero, you commanded up to 5, pulled from a roster of 10 recruits split between armored warriors and defenseless but devastating witches. The story starts small. A warrior named Rick, his master murdered, a village girl named Army, rescued from the same massacre. It ends with an evil king overthrown. In between, Hazard punishes carelessness. Enemies hit hard enough that players had to learn to pull monsters one at a time or watch their whole party die at once. Released only in Korea, then Europe via Virgin Interactive, then China, never anywhere else, it's now buried on niche Abandonware repositories, playable only through compatibility layers like DG Voodoo. Not every Abandonware game was ambitious. Tahl, Uncover the Evil Within, from Korean studio Hanbitsoft, was refreshingly simple point, click, grind through hordes of ghosts and demons pulled from East Asian folklore instead of Western fantasy. That simplicity should have made it a hit. It didn't. Tahl never found an audience, not even in its home country, and slipped into obscurity almost the moment it launched. Today, it exists mostly as an entry in old databases, Moby Games, IGDB, a title collectors recognize by name, and almost nobody has actually played. By the time Corum 3 Chaotic Magic arrived, Highcom Entertainment had already spent 2 games refining the formula combo attacks, dashes, elemental and chaos spells, layered over classic hack-and-slash combat. The story follows Kayan Beist, a knight wandering into the aftermath of a war that ended when the king simply killed himself. 3 sages, 1 cursed girl, and an artifact called the Jumarian later. Corum 3 stands as one of the more polished Korean action RPGs of its era, which makes its total commercial disappearance outside Asia even stranger. Fan translations exist. A playable copy survives on the Internet Archive. That's it. Picture Diablo colliding with Indiana Jones in 1876 Nubia. That's Dark Secrets of Africa, German developer, New Generation Software, sending archaeologist Howard Hawk after the lost grave of Pharaoh Shishak, armed with his dead father's papyrus scroll, and eventually a rifle against cursed Spider-Men and cultists of a Lovecraftian old god named Azag Thoth. For 1999, it was ambitious. Full day-night cycles, sandstorms, rain, 15 atmospheric missions. It also let you hire up to 6 local inhabitants to carry your gear. Hireling's modern retrospectives have bluntly called slaves in all but name. Built for Windows 98, it barely runs on anything built since. Emulators like PCEM are the only way in now. Here's a fact that sounds made up. One of the 4 playable heroes in Dragonfire, the Well of Souls, is a sword-wielding, anthropomorphic pirate duck. Swedish developer Computer House built the game as an official adaptation of Drakar och Demoner, Sweden's biggest tabletop RPG, and stayed weirdly faithful to it, ducks included. The mission itself was standard enough. Stop the resurrection of a sealed sorcerer named Vikotnik before he ends 6 years of peace. No magic for any of the heroes, just pure physical combat and 4-player LAN co-op. It's a Diablo-shaped game, filmed through a completely different, much stranger lens, and it vanished just as completely as the games it imitated. Droiyan 2, Absolute Monarch, never left Korea in English, no translation, ever, and that alone buried a game that, at home, was a legitimate hit. KRG Soft dressed up their hack-and-slash combat in full military sci-fi. A stranded space pilot, a rebel faction called GOD, a princess to rescue, 15 minutes of cutscenes and 2,000 sound effects that studios, twice its size, would have bragged about. It even had online multiplayer through something called HunterNet. None of it mattered to the West, because none of it was ever translated for the West. It survives now purely as a cult object for big box collectors of early 2000s Korean PC gaming. Dispel had ambitions nobody expected from a Diablo-style game in 2000. an early stab at an open world, and a morality system that actually reshaped how the story ended. Set on the continent of Daman after a war between gods, it built a small but devoted following across Russia, Poland, Taiwan, and Spain. Then it nearly vanished for good. A 2001 multiplayer expansion called Dispel Colosseum was considered lost media for years before fans managed to recover and preserve it. Physical copies are now vanishingly rare. What keeps Dispel alive today is almost entirely grassroots, a Reddit archive, a Discord server, and a fan-built installer called the Doogie Launcher. Not every abandoned game deserves rediscovery, and The Broken Land is the honest exception on this list. A war between gods splits heaven into 5 pieces. You spend the game reassembling it. That's the whole pitch. IGN gave it a 3.7 awful, in their own word, and time hasn't been kinder. What's interesting isn't the game itself, it's the afterlife. There's still an active GOG community wishlist entry begging for a digital re-release of a game nobody particularly liked. Decades later. Nostalgia, it turns out, doesn't require quality. It just requires memory. Pillars of Garendall wasn't just a game, it was a pitch. Beanox and Ambrosia Software built it to show off the Coldstone engine, a tool meant to let anyone build their own RPG. Inside the fiction, you're the master of a royal riding school defending a kingdom from sea giants. Outside the fiction, you're playing a tech demo with a surprisingly sincere story attached. The problem came later. Coldstone's bugs never got fixed, newer macOS versions broke the game outright, and neither studio wanted to rebuild the engine from scratch. So Ambrosia simply stopped selling it. No scandal, no announcement, just a quiet, permanent shelving that makes Pillars of Garendall Abandonware almost by technicality. ShadowFlare didn't release as one game, it released as 4. One shareware episode at a time, from October 2001 to February 2003. Each chapter sold separately as you climbed toward a final confrontation with a demon named Dignosis. Along the way, 3 classes, an elemental system built on 8 separate attributes, and a loyal dog that levels up right alongside you. Modeled unapologetically on Diablo 2, it built enough of a cult following that fans are still trying to rebuild it in Unity today. But the original distribution servers have been dark for over a decade. What's left is scattered across Up2Down and the Internet Archive. 4 episodes of a shareware ghost. Gorasul's weapon stock back. Literally every blade you carry levels up alongside you, tracks its own ego, and will openly mock your decisions if that ego climbs too high. It's the strangest, most memorable idea buried inside an otherwise familiar Baldur's Gate-style story. An orphan named Rosondas, raised by a dragon, killed fighting a demonic invasion, resurrected a decade later by a god to finish the job. German developer Silverstyle Entertainment clearly had more ideas than budget. Critics loved the concepts and hated the buggy execution and rough English translation. If you ever track this one down, hunt for community patch 1.05 first. Without it, Gorasul is barely playable. Relics. The second birth let you leave your own body behind. The core mechanic called Spirit Ride lets Randy, an elite commander caught between the Eternal Heathen and Hell factions, separate his spirit from his flesh and possess other creatures entirely. It's a strange, ambitious idea buried in a game that barely left Japan. Developed by Bothtech as a sequel to 1999 Relics, The Recur of Origin, it traded the original's multiple endings for a tighter, more linear story and never found an audience outside its home country. What survives today is mostly bundled inside a Japanese compilation disc, a footnote to a series almost nobody outside Japan ever played. NightStone launched directly into Diablo 2's shadow and never really escaped it. 3 heroes, Barbarian, Amazon, Sorceress, start the game scattered across the map and have to fight their way back to each other before the real story even begins. A corrupting black meteorite building rock circles of dark magic across the land. The design choices were unforgiving by modern standards. One merchant for the entire game, no saving mid-mission, tight inventory space. But it shipped with something genuinely generous, a built-in map and mission editor, letting players build their own co-op adventures for up to 8 people. Virgin Interactive is long gone. What's left are old CD-ROMs on eBay and a PC gaming wiki page keeping the compatibility notes alive. Another war traded fantasy dungeons for occupied Europe. Polish developer Mirage Interactive built a World War II isometric RPG that opens with a Gestapo prison break in occupied France and eventually drags its nameless adventurer through Germany, Yugoslavia, a devastated Leningrad, and improbably Iceland. It's dense with pop culture references quoting everything from Catch 22 to Raiders of the Lost Ark, and its combat leans tactical rather than pure hack and slash. Critics respected the ambition and hated the execution. Clunky targeting, buggy weapon degradation, unreliable hit registration. A war game about survival that in the end didn't survive its own launch. Necromania looks like a Diablo clone and plays like spy versus spy. 7 of an imprisoned Dark Lord's minions race each other through 4 cursed worlds, hunting the keys that will set him free, and only one of them wins. Instead of cooperating, you're setting traps, stealing resources, and actively sabotaging 6 other players scrambling for the exact same prize. It's a genuinely unusual multiplayer structure wrapped in a fairly unremarkable engine, and critics at the time weren't shy about saying so. What survives is a curiosity more than a classic filed away today on the Internet Archive and the GOG Dream List, waiting for players willing to overlook the interface for the concept underneath. Spells of Gold asked the strange question: what if your action RPG hero also had to run a business? Set in the world of Lothrian, it splits your time between hack and slash combat against undead and beasts, and pure trade economics, buying low in one town, selling high in the next, funding your entire build through import-export margins. Even your magic came from religious devotion, praying to specific gods to unlock elemental schools. It's a clever hybrid let down by one glaring omission: no centralized way to track prices, forcing players into manual spreadsheets just to play the economy properly. Modders eventually patched it for modern resolutions. The GOG Dream List still gets requests for an official comeback. Kingsoft didn't just make a new game in 2002, they rebuilt an entire franchise. New Legend of the Swordsman took their hit 1997 turn-based RPG and reforged it as a real-time Diablo 2 style action game, swapping Western spellbooks for wuxia skill trees full of sword key and internal cultivation. Dugujian, avenging his murdered master, uncovers a conspiracy tangled up in the Jin Kingdom's invasion of Song China across 6 wildly different possible endings. Its theme song, Yuan, became a genuine hit in Chinese gaming circles. And its success didn't just launch a game, it launched Kingsoft's JX Online, which eventually grew into JX3, one of the biggest MMORPG franchises in Asia. Not every abandoned game stays abandoned in spirit. Some just become someone else's empire. Most of the games on this list borrow their darkness from Western fantasy or Diablo's demons. Talisman, Charm of War, from Russian developer Anti-Tank, went somewhere else entirely. Slavic folklore, forest spirits called Leshi, mermaid Rusalkas, the witch Baba Yaga, all guarding the way to a lost city called Kiag. Its biggest gamble was a fully open morality system. Nothing was off limits, and players could tear apart nearly anything in the world if it got them closer to their goals. It's one of the more obscure entries here, a game built on mythology most Western players have never even heard of, let alone played. Before it was anything else, Anito, Defend a Land and Rage, was the very first video game ever fully developed in the Philippines. Anino Entertainment set it on the fictional 16th century island of Marroca, caught between tribal war and colonizing invaders, and built the story around Datu Mactan's 2 children, Agila and Maya, each with their own quests and combat style, searching for their vanished father across 5 towns and over 150 characters. It leaned hard into pre-colonial Filipino folklore and spiritual tradition, the word Anito itself drawn straight from that mythology. Critics liked the story, disliked the dated interface. Physical copies are nearly extinct now, only a demo survives, quietly, on the Internet Archive. The Fate sold over 100,000 copies in Korea in its first few weeks, a genuine commercial hit built specifically to ride Korea's Diablo obsession. Then its developer, Tronwell, closed down almost immediately after, and the English release that followed was riddled with bugs so specific that Western players had to install Asian language packs on Windows XP just to read the menus correctly. The story itself, Loney searching a mysterious island for his missing brother and a legendary blade, was solid, even ahead of its time with a full day-night cycle and dynamic weather. But between the studio's collapse and the broken localization, the Fate became exactly what its name warned it would. An enigma nobody quite remembers, despite everybody briefly having bought it. Long before Paradox Entertainment became synonymous with grand strategy, they co-developed this. A Norse mythology action RPG sending 4 heroes through Valhalla, Hell, and Muspelheim to stop Loki from ending the world. GameSpot gave it a 3.4 out of 10. Years later, Paradox's own Johan Andersson would openly joke about a contemporary review that summed the whole experience up. Bugs, many and diverse, some more interesting than the gameplay. It's rare that a developer's own leadership laughs at their old work in public. It's rarer still that the game has an active petition on the GOG Dream List asking for its return anyway. Elixir barely exists in the historical record, a Korean isometric action RPG built around commanding a full team of 4 heroes at once, heavy on magic, tactically demanding, and, unusually for the genre, completely bloodless. No gore, no viscera, a hack and slash built to be family friendly. What little documentation survives is split between Korean and German, leaving English-speaking players almost entirely locked out. There's no cult community around Elixir, no Discord server, no fan translation project. Just a Moby Games page and not much else. Possibly the single most forgotten game on this entire list. Restricted area, swapped fantasy castles for a corporate-controlled 2083, where 7 megacorporations quietly run a collapsed world and hire mercenaries, hackers, and psychics to do their fighting for them. German developer Master Creating leaned hard into William Gibson-style cyberpunk, giving players 4 wildly different specialists, a firearms mercenary, a cybernetic melee fighter, a drone-controlling hacker, a mind-powered psionic, each with 75 skills to master and actual cyberware to surgically implant. It scored a middling 51 on Metacritic. Strong atmosphere, repetitive missions, weak voice work. It doesn't run on modern Windows without a virtual machine, which feels oddly appropriate for a game about bodies being rebuilt piece by piece just to survive. Alexander. The Hero's Hour exists because a Hollywood movie needed a video game tie-in, fast. Rushed out to ride the release of Oliver Stone's Alexander. It put players in command of 3 elite soldiers, a brute, a swordsman, a ranged specialist serving Alexander the Great, complete with tactical pausing to juggle all 3 at once in real time. The ambition was there, the execution wasn't. Pathfinding broke constantly, controls felt unfinished, and critics didn't hesitate to say the rushed development showed in every corner of the game. It's less remembered today for its gameplay than for what it represents. A small, forgotten casualty of a movie marketing cycle nobody thinks about anymore. Morning's Wrath put its entire identity into one mechanic. A magic system built from 24 runes, which players combine anywhere from 2 to 12 at once to handcraft entirely custom spells onto scrolls. New runes come from sacrifice, quite literally. feeding artifacts into a magical wellspring buried beneath the castle. The story is a betrayal story. Princess Morning's own fiancé lets an invading army into her home. Her parents are killed, and she has to master magic fast enough to take her kingdom back. It's a small, sincere indie game from Ethereal Darkness Interactive that never had the marketing budget to be remembered, just an atmospheric score, still floating around on SoundCloud, and a name on old GOG wish lists. Bonus Adventures wants you to know exactly what it's referencing. An archaeologist named Mark Bones digging up a mummy in the 1930s that's inexplicably older than the tomb it was buried in. From there, it splits between isometric hack-and-slash dungeon levels and old-school adventure puzzle solving, letting players level a classless character up to 100 across 8 attributes and 9 derived skills. Czech studio Bonarts pushed a major patch just 5 months after launch to fix its rougher edges. In Germany, it shipped under a different name entirely. Im Schatten der Mumie, In the Shadow of the Mummy, a small, globe-trotting curiosity that never made it much further than that. Mage Knight. Apocalypse borrowed its world from a tabletop miniatures game and its pacing from Dungeon Siege. 5 wildly different classes, from a rifle-wielding dwarf to a literal dragon-man sorcerer, drafted by spirit masters to stop a looming apocalypse. Skills here don't level up on a menu. They improve the more you actually use them. An organic system ahead of its time. IGN gave it a 54 out of 100, citing bugs and flat voice acting, and the game never quite recovered its reputation. Getting the 6-disc PC release running today means DG Voodoo, DX Wind, or a Windows XP virtual machine, and a GOG Dreamlist entry, still holding out hope for something easy. When the Russian fantasy film Wolfhound became a genuine blockbuster, its merchandising went further than most 3 separate video games, all licensed off the same property, all released the same year. Wolfhound, The Last of the Grey Dogs, was the budget entry, a straightforward, Russia-only Diablo clone following the sole survivor of an annihilated clan on a single-minded revenge quest against the warlord who destroyed his home. It never left the country, unlike its better-known sibling Requital, which got the English translation. This one never did. Today it's mostly remembered by confusion, mixed up with the game that actually made it out. Originally released in Poland simply as Frater, the chosen Well of Souls sends 3 very different heroes: a mage, a stealthy ranged thief, and a brute force warrior after an immortal sorcerer who's been murdering the world's alchemists to steal their souls. His target, a being that only manifests once every 200 years. Polish studio Rebelmind built out a genuinely large arsenal, over 200 weapons and pieces of gear, plus the ability to summon golems and spirits to fight alongside you. It's a fairly by-the-numbers hack-and-slash on paper, elevated by a genuinely strange, patient villain, a sorcerer playing a 2-century-long game most players never fully appreciated. Most Diablo-style games of this era stayed flat, 2D, pre-rendered. The Dark Tower Conspiracy didn't. Russian studio Semargl built it on a fully rotational 3D engine, a real technical outlier for a budget dungeon crawler in 2006. Underneath the tech demo is a fairly familiar story. A young soldier joins the Imperial Army at the Borderlands, gets sent to find a missing assistant and a vanished legion, and stumbles into the real reason monsters are invading in the first place. Distribution never left Russia and Ukraine, and today what survives is mostly scans and screenshots preserved in detail, but functionally unplayable for almost anyone who'd want to try. Legend. Hand of God replaced its mouse cursor with a character. Luna, a small glowing fairy, lights up the game's randomly generated dungeons, points out hidden secrets, and talks to you constantly as you fight your way toward the shattered artifact that gives the game its name. German developer Master Creating builds cinematic touches around the combat too, giving the hero contextual attack animations instead of generic swings. It got a companion novel. It got an audiobook. It even got Uwe Boll circling a $40 million film adaptation that, thankfully or unfortunately, never happened. What it didn't get was staying power. Its browser, spin-off, MMO limped along until Gameforge finally shut it down in 2020. Somewhere in the Russian budget gaming underground of the 2000s, one developer, Yevgeny Agishev, was cranking out dozens of cheap games on the exact same unoptimized engine, mostly racing titles. Lord of the Dark Forces was his one detour into fantasy. A stiff, barely functional Diablo clone with hit detection so broken and animations so sparse that Russian outlets openly called it a disaster and listed it among the worst releases of the year. But there's a strange footnote of respect buried in the reviews. Critics specifically praised Agishev for putting his own real name in the credits instead of hiding behind a fake studio at a time when most budget developers didn't dare. Old Games Russia preservationists still hunt down physical copies today, calling it affectionately schlock digital waste worth saving anyway. Space Siege asks a much colder question than most games on this list. How much of yourself are you willing to cut away just to survive? Earth is gone. Kerak forces have wiped it out, and Seth Walker is left defending humanity's last ship, but every time he loses a limb, the fix isn't healing, it's replacement. Cybernetic arms, cybernetic organs, real power gained at the cost of something harder to measure. His only steady companion through it all is HRV, a robot sidekick you upgrade alongside your own increasingly artificial body. Developed by Gas Powered Games and published by Sega, it vanished from digital storefronts entirely and now runs into a small, almost funny modern problem. Windows hides your cursor by default, and the only fix is forcing the game into windowed mode, a minor glitch standing between you and a game about losing your humanity one upgrade at a time. Diamond Sword, Wooden Sword adapts the first novel in Nick Perumov's Keeper of the Sword saga, a Russian dark fantasy epic about an empire built on subjugating elves, dwarves, and orcs thrown into chaos when two ancient world-breaking blades awaken at once. Mercenary Fess gets caught in the middle of the search for gold. Mechanically, it's a fairly direct descendant of Diablo and Sacred, third-person hack-and-slash with magic and gear progression layered on top. By 2008, the formula was showing its age, and critics said, so dated visuals, repetitive combat, technical rough edges, nobody bothered to smooth out before launch. The last entry on this list is also, fittingly, the strangest genre mix. A Farewell to Dragons adapts a steampunk fantasy novel by Sergei Lukyanenko and Nikolai Perumov, dropping a doctor named Victor into a world of locomotives, dwarven scientists, firearms, and traditional spellcasting all at once, and asking him to choose, eventually, between becoming a dragon creator or a dragon slayer. Despite being labeled an action RPG, it plays closer to an old-school pause-and-plan CRPG like Arcanum, deliberate and heavily story-driven. It launched on Steam. It's since been delisted from Steam. In 2009, at the very edge of this decade-long era, even a modern digital storefront couldn't guarantee a game would still be there when you came looking for it, which might be the most fitting closing note this whole genre could ask for. 40 games, 11 years, a few thousand copies sold, most of them scattered, and every single one of them now surviving only because someone, somewhere, refused to let a working disc rot in a drawer. That's the strange irony of Abandonware. The moment a publisher stops caring is the exact moment a small, stubborn community starts. My Abandonware, the Internet Archive, GOG Dream List full of petitions nobody answers, Discord servers keeping decade-old patches alive. These games aren't gone. They're just waiting behind a slightly harder door than the one Steam gives you. If even one of these 40 dungeons pulled you in, go find it. Boot up a virtual machine. Dig out an old CD-ROM. Hunt down a fan translation. That's the only kind of preservation that actually works. And if you want more crypts open, more forgotten clickfests dragged back into the light, subscribe and I'll keep digging.